Hey guys, welcome back to the Lit Mag Lab podcast. I'm Jazz Marie, aka Vivnaforo. So previously I was giving you a tour of the First Line Literary Journal. Don't forget that it is also part of Blue Cubicle Press, an independent publisher that also has not just the first line, but the last line and Workers' Right plus chapbooks in their overtime series. So yeah, there is a lot umbrellaed under Blue Cubicle Press. So totally listen back to that episode and check out more of it. I think the first few minutes of the episode, on Duotrope when I was showing you their page, it had active projects listed under there. So not just again the first line and last line, but they have quite a few other series that they do through Blue Cubicle Press. So it's very cool. Yes, again, you can watch my screen out on YouTube, Spotify, and elsewhere. What I'm sharing, you may be seeing right now that I am on Galley today. Now, as you recall from this podcast series I've been following along since day one, I don't just share literary magazines and journals, I also go over various platforms, software services, and tools that may be beneficial to founding editors and perhaps writers as well. So today we will be going over Galley. That's Galley, and I'm on their website, which is galley.pub, pub, right? So Galley is something I came across technically last year, but I mistook it for a literary magazine. I don't know why. But I looked at it further when they had followed me on Blue Sky. I was like, oh, Galley is an editorial review system. It's a submission management platform, right? And I was like, oh, this is really cool. So yeah, I'm just gonna do what I call an overview episode. There are quite a few overview type episodes on this series. I've done one over Submittable, Subfolio, Dapple, Duosuma, Ola, and Moksha, right? Those are all submission management systems in existence. So again, this is an existence sharing episode. And yeah, so Galley currently is in the beta phase, as you may see on the upper left-hand corner. So it states here on the homepage, every submission deserves a careful read. Editors get a calm, focused review workflow. Writers get a clean place to send their best work. Galley is the editorial platform for literary journals that take reading seriously. Yeah, so you're probably like, well, who developed this? So, yeah, if we scroll down to the bottom here, I'll cover this other plans and pricing for you guys in a little bit here. But if you go to letter to the editors, right? If we go here, right, you can see Thomas and it mentions off season mag, right? So this is off season mag. This is their website. Check them out as well, offseasonmag.com. I won't, go over their submission guidelines and, issues like that. Maybe I'll cover it in another episode one day. We'll see. But if you go over to the masthead section, right, and goes here, right, so you can see the editor in chief is Sophia Ross Eckert. And if we scroll down, you can see the staff. And there's Thomas Eckert, right? And he's a web developer. States here Thomas Eckert is a software developer from Ontario, Canada. He earned his master's in physics at the University of Rochester, then went on to a career in software at Microsoft, HashiCorp, and Red Panda Data. He likes to paint watercolors and listen to history podcasts while walking his dog. So yeah, that's awesome, So that's off season. Again, you can check it out further if you'd like, but I'm gonna head back over to Galley. Again, we've totally seen, some lit mags and journals, on the masthead or staff members have, gone and created their own, you could say submission management or editorial review solution, right? We've seen that with, Ola, right? And which is, originally like Oleada, and that Oleada's phased out. Now Ola exists, right, through, Joshua wrote this, right, of Asters and books, so totally, again, some lit mags and journals, staff members do create their own solutions, maybe not just submission management systems or editorial review platforms, but some useful tools and, apps even, for lit mags and journals to leverage maybe writers and founding editors or a platform or service, and yeah, so think about that. If you have something, you want to create or build for the lit mag community or literary journal press or something you're passionate about, totally go for it, And yeah, I just wanted to mention that. But anyways, back to Galley. So yeah, I think that's awesome, that Thomas is launching this. Now, just for you're aware, it's not launched officially quite yet. This is again the beta phase. So if you go out to their social media page, on Galley.pub. I think they're on Instagram, Blue Sky, and elsewhere, probably, and Substack. So, Instagram, there's a post stating early access is about to take place on April 1st, 2026. And then the official launch date is showing June 1st, 2026. So, yeah, I think if you go into the contact section, it's not quite live yet. I got a delivery failure when I tried to send an email. So, I will circle back to that. I'm sure it'll be fixed, closer to its early access date as it approaches here, right? It's still, towards the end of March right now, right? So, and then the launch date, June 1st, 2026. So, just, again, something to bookmark to be aware of, right? And yeah. So, I'm going to scroll down to the about section again here for you guys and go back. So it states here again, Galley is a modern editorial review platform for journals, is a thoughtful alternative to Submittable. What Galley does: zero friction submissions. Writers submit through a clean web form or by email. No account required. Review first design. Editors read, vote, comment, and decide in a calm, focused interface. From submission to publication, the full editorial workflow from open call to publish credit. Yeah, so that's an outline of it. I'm sure more will be added to the site as it kicks off and the anticipated, date of the summer, right, in June. So yeah, again, I haven't done a trial of it. I did do the sign up just because I was curious, right, what it looks like when you click in the sign up, and then it prompts you, if you're a founding editor, right, you can list your publication in there. I haven't gone ahead and done that. Again, a reminder, I left Submittable in the summer of 2025 and moved to Subfolio, another submission management platform, which I cover a little bit on this podcast, just sharing some, things I like about it. And yeah, just because I like Subfolio again doesn't mean necessarily you will. Everyone has a platform, service, or software that they prefer over others, right? So, and yeah, there's pros and cons to each one, right? Some have different features, some have different, right, pricing and plans, right? Or even discounts through CLMP. Now, in terms of the pricing and plans, we're going to check that out. I don't know if there's going to be a CLMP membership discount, with Galley, or even, other ones I've covered in the series. Not all of them do that, right? If you're a member of the community of literary magazines and presses. So, the only ones that have that to date are Subfolio, Dapple, Duo Suma, and yeah, Submittable, right? So yeah, that discount makes a lot of the submission management platforms more affordable for founding editors, right? And yeah, totally. But yeah, so I don't know if that'll happen with Galley or even some of the other ones I've covered on the series one day. But yeah, so it says here, right? We'll come back to up and running in minutes, but let's go over the pricing and plans here. So here it says simple, fair pricing, no per submission fees, no surprise cost, free to start, pay when you grow. And yeah, so just a heads up again, pricing and plans can change over time, especially after a platform launches, after its beta phase. We've seen that with Dapple, adjust things, right? I think Dapple, I could be wrong, they got rid of the free tier plan and now there's just three plans visible on their site. Of course, there's, demos and free trials of most nearly every platform, or service in existence. So yeah, I don't know, if this will stay the same, as it, kicks off, or any changes there in terms of discounts and offerings, for nonprofits or anything like that. I don't know with Galley, but this is what it is as of March 2026. $0. So for journals just getting started, one editor, one active call, 50 submissions a year. And yeah, that seems like more of like a one-off plan, and just like trying it out almost a little bit. I think most literary magazines and journals would be geared towards, the standard or obviously professional plan, right? Because, standard is showing, right, 2,000 submissions a year, unlimited calls, 3 editors, 5 reviewers for $15 a month. The workhorse tier for independent journals, right? So yeah, and it's showing there may be, right, annual plans available typically for a lot of these submission management systems. So you typically have the option of doing monthly or annual, usually, right, an annual plan. And yeah, so $15 a month isn't bad. I think that's pretty good pricing, for that amount, compared to, some of the other ones I've covered in the series. And towards the end of this podcast, I'll do a recap a little bit for you guys so you can see like a side by side comparison, and just, let you know again which episodes those are. Maybe if you're not looking at the playlist out on, YouTube or elsewhere for the sections of this series and some of the other places I plugged this into. So yeah, $15 a month, not bad at all. I think, Safoli also has a fairly reasonable low cost plan, right? And yeah. Now professional for Galley is showing $60 a month. Yeah, that's on the higher end, right? Aksha I think is like, as of still today in 2026, is like $75 a month. And Dapple also has some higher end pro plans, or you could say enterprise plans, right? And yeah, every place has a higher tiered plan. If you're on the CLMP membership discount, with right, again, just a reminder, there's like a one-time bill you pay for the year, right? And yeah, so there's that annual fee you pay, and it depends on your, lit mag journals, I think, annual revenue or size, right, on that one time. And then on top of that, right, you have your monthly bill through submission management system if it's eligible for a discount, right, whether it be right Subfolio, Duosuma, Dapple, or Submittable, right? Submittable, most writers, right, are aware of that or have leveraged it because a lot of lit magazine journals and presses still today, even other organizations, use it, for grant applications, other things, right? And yeah, so $60 a month, I would say, is on the higher end. There are some plans out there that are right, $29 a month, right? So keep that in mind. And typically, right, the higher the plan, more features are within it, right? And yeah, so it's stating, right, for that you get 10 editors, 25 reviewers, unlimited calls and submissions, 100 gigabyte storage, custom domain. So yeah, again, as it takes off, and maybe as others have feedback on it, Galley, there probably will be other features maybe added or adjustments to it, I'm thinking. So this is what it's showing as of currently. So I'm just sharing it with you guys. It says, they have also a department tier coming soon, right? So for university affiliate journals. So that's cool, right? So yeah, there may be some other plan here coming up, right, for especially university affiliate journals. So that's nice, yeah. And yeah, so it's stating you could, set up your journal on Galley in minutes, and start accepting submissions today. Again, they haven't officially launched yet. The early access is stating April 1st on their social media feed. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Yeah, so again, it reiterates here right above that the pricing plans built for small journals with serious editorial standards. Galley is for literary magazines that run on dedication, taste, and a small team of readers who care deeply about the work. Whether you publish quarterly or annually in print or online with 2 editors or 20, Galley fits the way you already work. They're a small team too. Galley started because, off-season mag, right? It states here, right? The team behind it, right? They run a journal themselves and couldn't find a tool that respected the reading process. So, right, they built one, right? And yeah, so that's awesome. And yeah, so the features here, it says everything a journal needs, nothing it doesn't. I'm sort of working my way backwards up the page for you guys in this one. So yeah, it says open calls, create reading periods with deadlines, categories, and guidelines, share a clean public page that writers can submit through directly, review workflow, assign submissions to readers, score, comment, and discuss, then make decisions as a team. Team management, invite editors and reviewers, control who sees what, coordinate without endless email threads. Submission tracking, writers see where their work stands, editors see the full pipeline, everyone stays informed. Email submissions, so accept submissions via a dedicated inbox. Galley parses the email and adds it to your inbox automatically. Clean typography, manuscripts render in a reading friendly layout because the words matter more than the interface. Yeah. So I'm not really sure what that all looks like or entails quite yet, obviously, because I haven't conducted a trial. It's in the beta phase right now, so it hasn't kicked off, right? Yeah, but again, def important, right, for being able to score and vote and to collaborate, right? I think that's where submission management systems, editorial review, platforms really are beneficial for that collaboration. And you can't really do that really well with, Google Forms and some of the other ones. You end up using multiple, right, tools to do that, right, if you're using strictly just email or Google Forms, right? So it helps to have something there, right? Of course, everyone likes free plans, right? Or things that are low cost, and, cost savings is important. because lit magazine journals have very, very tight budgets to work with, obviously. But yeah, I think, what I'm seeing to date, the features mentioned, it sounds cool, I just, can't give a rating or review on it or anything like that. I did add it and plug it in my list, updated my guide, even mentioned it. So yeah, it's one to just be aware of and to maybe circle back if you're in the midst of thinking about starting a lit mag journal, or, maybe thinking about switching your submission man system. Some lit magazine journals have, move to, right, submittable even, or move to dapple, or move to subfolio like we have, right. Again, I feel like, the challenge for a lot of writers and artists nowadays is that there's every litman journal is using a different intake system, right, for submissions, right. Some are just using email, some are using, right, submittable, or, subfolio like we are, right, or have moved, from away from Google Forms, or maybe I've seen some on this series, like I shared with you, right, have moved away from submittable to tally forms, even, right, and yeah, so there are a lot of different ways you can go about, facilitating, tip jars and things of that nature. I do not know if Galley is going to add some, additional features or support things like tip jars, or, some, things with form building and things of that nature, or how, files are previewed and all of that. I don't know what that all looks like or entails, to date. So I can't give you any insight on that. So it's going to come down to, again, maybe doing a trial of it in the near future, or others, right? Just checking it out and stuff, right? So you don't really understand or grasp the system until you dive into it, right? And see whether or not you like it. You can usually tell in the first, few minutes or so, is it easy to grasp or not? However, I will say, right, for everyone, I know it emphasizes, right, be up and running in minutes, but ultimately, if you were to put, let's say submittable, subfolio, dapple, duosuma, ola, moksha, and galley in front of the same editor, right, um in front of various editors, right, or even the same editor, just one editor, trying different systems, some of those they would have a different time, right, in terms of getting everything set up for their Litmanger journal, right. It wouldn't be the exact same time, right, to set up their calls or their Litmanger journal. So, what's easy to grasp for someone may not be easy to grasp for another, right. It all depends there sometimes. But ease of use and user friendliness is so important, absolutely, right. So it stays up and running in minutes. Obviously everyone likes to have a quick setup, when they're starting and they want to get up and running for intaking submissions. you know I think whenever, if you've been established in a submission man system for a while, like maybe some lit manager journals have been, per se on, submittable for several years, right, and we were on it, right. My reading team and I were on submittable for, a little over 2 years. And, migrating to Subfolio, it wasn't too bad at all. Honestly, it wasn't too bad at all. You just have to block out some time. And, it didn't take me a full year to migrate over or anything like that. I did it, fairly, easy, and yeah. So I can't remember if it was like a month or so. It was just a few weeks, honestly. It may have been like collectively a few weeks, because I was working on other things and we were still in taking submissions. So I had to wait until, our calls were closed and make sure we had everything, that I needed before pulling the plug on submittable. So just because, maybe it takes someone a few days or a few weeks, or, it could take someone a few months to migrate over to another platform. It all depends, on how much you have in your archive, how many calls you have, how long your Lit journal's been running, right? There are various factors to take in consideration, right? When you're migrating to a new system, if you're just starting, then maybe you don't have anything to migrate or really worry about there. You just, go, right. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, up and running in minutes again. Yeah, so the time span is going to vary. For some, it may not necessarily take minutes. I would say, it could vary. Now, we've covered in some of the Q&As, with, Dap on Sofolio on the series. You can read those out on Substack. The migration and transfer process, right? It's important to have, support behind that, or, to do that. Some of the submission platforms I've covered do have a very cool migration, capabilities, right? That helps you, get your calls set up and everything, your submission categories and buckets, right? And yeah, and to ensure that you have what you need, to keep going with the same calls and everything, like your original setup, to mirror it right from that previous platform you were on. Anyways, so I don't know what it would be like with Galley to date, because I just created a quick account just to see. You plug in your submission manager, so I haven't gone all the way in quite yet, with Galley, and done all that to really poke around it. But yeah, I'm sure on April 1st and upcoming months I probably will circle back to it and check it out further, and update my list and pros cons list that I've been attaining, and yeah, and also the guidebook. So yeah, it says step one: create your journal, sign up for free, and set up your organization under a minute. Step two: open a call, define your reading period, categories, and submission guidelines. Step three: share the link. Writers submit through your public page, no account required. Now, the whole aspect of no account required, I don't really know what that looks like. I don't know if that's going to change with Galley, but I think it is beneficial for founding editors, or the Lit Manual Journal to have an account, and then writers also to have, or artists to have an account, right? So I don't really know what that entails or really looks like, the whole layout of Galley with that no account required mention. So I can't really tell you on that, but I think that sounds cool, the aspect of sharing link. That I think that's unique. I haven't really seen anyone do that, so I'm curious what that will entail. Step that three, share the link. And then step four is read and decide, review in a focused reading view, score, comment, and decide as a team. Yeah, so that's awesome, right? So there are collaborative features in Galley within it. The whole aspect again of the shared link, step three, I think again, writers do like to see right their statuses and all of that. So I don't know if that's what it's going to really entail. There is like a little preview here, right, of the editorial command center for editors. You can see here, right, every submission, every status, every reviewer in one place, filter by call, scan by status, and move through your queue with keyboard shortcuts. The inbox is where editorial decisions happen. So yeah, we have an example here of what it'll look like essentially, right? The title, the submission, the author name. The status is in a column, the call type or category bucket when it was submitted, and the reviewers assigned, right? So yeah, there's different statuses we're seeing change, right? So in review, shortlisted, and received, right? So yeah, so, that's typical, of most submission man systems, not all, but, to have, the ability to see statuses, the call they're from, the submission time, team members on it, the author, and yeah, and the title of the submission. Now, I do like submission man systems that, allow for, concealed reads, and hiding the cover letter and identifying information. I think that is a nice feature to have. I don't know if Galley's going to do that, but, some of the ones I've covered in the series do absolutely, right? So it says send your work to readers, not a system. Submitting to a journal should feel like what it is, putting your writing in front of people who care about it. Galley keeps the submission process simple and transparent. So you have the category, the manuscript, or the file upload, right? And the cover letter, right? So yeah, it says upload your manuscript, add a cover letter. If the journal asks for one, submit. Track your status, that's it. No account creation maze, no cluttered portal, no reading fees hidden behind 3 clicks. Your work stays private. Unpublished manuscripts are only visible to the journal's editorial team. No public indexing, no third-party access. So that thing about no reading fees hidden behind 3 clicks, if you're wondering what that's referring to, absolutely. On the series in episode 35, the submittable overview episode, I showed you, I think it was around the 15th or 16th minute into that video of sharing my screen, when you click into some of the calls that show up under no fee on submittable, right, as a writer, sometimes you'll click into the call and you'll realize they have required tips or some weird required fees, right, actually. And again, tips should always be optional, right? They should never be required. So that is an example, and even Lit Mag News has mentioned this, and, I've shared in the series, right? That too is alarming. I think submittable, hopefully one day they address that. But sometimes you click into calls showing up under no fee, and, there are some weird, required form options some Lit Mags founding editors have inputted there versus just having a fixed fee or having that at the top, or they don't have any, option for, no fee in there at all. And then that upsets writers, right? When it's misleading, right? How they have their form set up. And Submittable doesn't, to date address that. Hopefully maybe they do, but yeah, check out episode 35, the 15th, and actually the 16th minute in, around there, between 15th and 16th minute is where I shared that, because that is concerning, right? Absolutely. So I do like that to emphasize, right? No reading fees hidden behind 3 clicks. And yeah, so something else, if we go, further up, right, back to the homepage. So at the top here, you can see Discover. There is a Discover page for Galley. And yeah, there's nothing in here quite yet, of course, because it hasn't launched yet. But you can see this is what essentially the layout will be, right? You have the journal name, right, and the call, and then the time it closes, and whether it's free or paid. So yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think Discover pages are really nice because it's something writers can bookmark. Artists are like, I'm gonna bookmark this Discover page, right? Safolu has a Discover page, Submittable has a Discover opportunities page, and yeah, Duosuma has a Discover, call page as well. And yeah, where you can filter and find calls centrally as well, aside from the Duotrope pages, right, and things like that. But yeah, so, you know, um, I think this is really nice to have, right? You can browse journals and accepting submissions. So yeah, that's cool. So yeah, I don't know again, in terms of other features, what it looks like for Galley in the future. Obviously, I'm sure, Thomas is going to intake feedback from others, as it kicks off, right? So we covered features, pricing. There is a change log here, which you can sort of click into and see. So there's a public change log on everything. So that's cool. Some submission management platforms, most of them do share any updates or things, maybe through a newsletter, a change log, or a board where you can see upcoming features, or even I've seen some places have like a status page, even of like that everything's up and running, or if there's downtime for maintenance, things of that nature. So that's nice that there's a public change log. And you can see also built in Ottawa, right? So yeah, if you go at the bottom of the site again, underneath product, there's an AI policy. I'm going to click into this, guys. So yeah, again, a lot of lit magazine journals today absolutely do need, also, again, not just lit magazine journals and presses, need an AI policy. I think it is absolutely necessary nowadays, to state whether, you have no AI work, at all permitted, right, in your lit magazine journal. Again, at my own lit magazine journal, we emphasize, right, human created work only, right? No AI work is permitted. And Duotrope has that field they've added, right? And who knows, maybe Chill Subs will do this one day too in their database. But I think it's nice to have that listed there, whether or not the Lit My Journal has an AI policy. It's so important to have that, even if it's a few lines, or, just at least there stated somewhere. And yeah, again, not just lit magazine journals need an AI policy, but I think it's great for submission management platforms to do that, or any services or software writers or artists are interacting with. Absolutely. And founding editors, right? So this is their AI policy as of March 2026. So I'm going to quote this off, right? So it states here, with the advent of large language models, we are all reckoning with changes to our work and personal lives. Thomas states that he believes that AI does not have a role to play in craft and art making. They are uniquely human tasks that are not meant to be automated away. He also believes it is important to disclose that he does use Claude Code as part of his software development process. His aim is to always be transparent with any AI usage because he believes people should have informed consent about the products they use. In It's stating here there's no AI in the product. There are no AI features in Galley, nor does he intend to add any. It says he has taken care to make sure that the work submitted to Galley is not read into any LLMs within the product. Again, that stands for large language models. The editorial review process demands time, process, and a human touch. His goal in developing Galley is to remove as much unnecessary friction in the process so that editors and reviewers can do their jobs. He believes that the manual review and reading of work is unnecessary friction. Furthermore, he does not want to build a tool in which human created work is inadvertently fed into a model for training. Keeping AI out of the product helps prevent this. There's no AI in their marketing. All copy in the marketing is written by him. And yeah, it says there's no AI in the marketing. All copy in the marketing is written by Thomas Eckert himself. There's no AI generated images, and no AI generated images will be used in any marketing materials for Galley. Marketing includes posts on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Substack. Thomas states he likes writing and he doesn't think AI writes like him, right? Yeah. And yeah, so Claude Code for development, right? So it states here it's an LLM that is used to aid in writing code for Galley. He has chosen to use Anthropic's Claude Code tool, and that's CLAUDE. Using Claude allows Thomas to write code more quickly and securely. However, this is not a vibe coded site. He uses this tool when it is appropriate in an effort to provide the best experience possible to users. He has chosen to use Anthropic in part because he believes it is more ethically conscious than other companies in this space. And he states it is perhaps a little bit more environmentally friendly. It states here, right, the monthly energy use for developing Galley with Claude is zero point 0.5 kilowatts kWh, and this is equivalent to running a laptop for 8 hours or driving an electric vehicle 2 miles. So yeah, I don't have much knowledge on Claude, myself, but I again, and most I've ever done for fun, just tinkering, because I'm curious, like how some of the LMLs work, right? And yeah, I don't have a lot of experience in terms of like the software engineering world. My first major, technically, and community college was mobile app development and programming, but I wasn't the best programmer per se or anything like that. Or, I got the hang of some programming languages a little bit, like the fundamentals of them. But yeah, in terms of like, Claude, right? I was watching some videos on it the other day, and when I came across Galley and saw the AI policy, and I was, looking at some articles on it that software engineers had shared, right? Their experience with it and why they use Claude, right? Or how they leverage it. And it's more so in the sense that, some software engineers are stating it helps them, optimize their work output or enhances it in a sense, and allows some software engineers to, save time essentially, right? To be more efficient, in terms of the execution of what they're developing and creating. Now, obviously, in the world today, in the Lit Mag world and community, right? A lot of Lit Mags journals have no AI policies. There are some out there I know will never touch any LLM, right? There are mixed viewpoints on this. Some are more strongly against LLMs than others, but so one software engineer, I had come across an article, I don't remember off the top of my head, but essentially what someone had stated was that the importance of, evolving with AI, not necessarily having it take over jobs, but leveraging it in a sense where it enhances some areas of certain fields, right? Now, absolutely, I would say AI has eliminated some jobs. It's heartbreaking and continues to impact various fields and industries. Very, very tough. Very hard, right? It's hit very hard, like the music industry and things like that, right? I think with AI and LLMs and the whole trading aspect, I share this podcast. I'm against, AI training on writers and artists' work and all of that, right? I think there needs to be better policies and regulation around it till today. It's just really lacking there, and there's still a lot of lawsuits around it and all of that. So, I don't know much about Claude Code myself or anything like that. I wouldn't be able to tell you much about it. If you're interested, obviously you could, do research on it online yourself, watch some videos a little bit more to learn about it. But yeah, again, if you have any questions or anything like that, you could always, reach out to Galley. I think, again, their contact inbox when I tried to leverage it, or the email, got a kickback. So I'm sure, again, it'll be fixed at some point in time. But anyways, yeah. I've seen some companies absolutely do some cool things by again using AI to create maybe simulation exercises for employees, right? who aren't, on site, and hands on, can't do the training in person, right? Simulation exercises and things of that nature, some rather innovative things. But again, I think absolutely a lot of software engineers, and, you know, software engineering departments, developers have been heavily impacted by AI. Every field has been, right? And yeah, totally, there are some out there in certain fields, like maybe software development, web development, even that they're, leveraging Claude not so much to do the work for them or anything like that, right? But more so to refine their work, to maybe help with debugging, or to help minimize errors, or to, comb through things in a more efficient manner. I don't know, that's just off the top of my head, thinking that through. I don't know, I'm not too familiar with Claude again, but essentially, not every software engineer or developer in the world outright tells people, what they use in their tool belt or things they leverage for what they created, out there. So I think it's really awesome that Thomas is transparent and upfront about that, leveraging Claude, right? The Claude code tool. And yeah, there's some YouTube videos out there. Others say, different things about Claude. And, I haven't used it myself or anything like that. And most I've ever done, totally, I've tinkered because I was curious what vibe code was, last year. I was like, I wonder what this is. So I was tinkering with it. I was just like curious what it is and how it works, right, essentially. And those prompt things, what that's like, like lovable base 44. I was messing around with those because I was like, what can you create with those? Like, how efficient is it, and what are the flaws of it, And again, Thomas emphasized, right, that Galley is not a vibe coded site, right, at all. So, but yeah, regardless of that, no matter what any, tools others use or the development behind it, right, the most important thing is that, there's effective support behind anything created, right? So, um, the aspect of, even platforms, even sites that are vibe coded, right, or anything that's developed in the world, right, regardless of it, the creation is what I'm saying. If something breaks, right, it's important to be able to fix it. And I think that's where a lot of the, people who are actually doing, vibe coded things, or those apps you spin up through prompts and stuff, without any software engineering development knowledge, right, it is extremely tough to sustain something like that long term, especially if you don't know how to fix things yourself or have no knowledge of, code development or programming at all, right? If something breaks, right, or there's bugs and things of that nature, right? You have to be able to go in, pinpoint it and fix it. Sure, there are probably tools, right, out there for doing that, right? Maybe it's Claude Code, for debugging, or some other tools, right, out there that software engineers use for troubleshooting, right, or to find and isolate what's happening. But you have to be able to, sustain anything long term, for decades, right? To have a good reliable support around it, right? It's absolutely important, I think, for developers to have, or anyone who creates something, that is leveraging any programming or development languages, right, to have working knowledge of how to fix things themselves, or to have a support team around them, right, to be able to do so and address it. So yeah, that's my only comment there. Again, I don't know much about Cloud Code. I was looking at some videos the other day, articles that software engineers had typed about why they use it and how it comes into play into their work, and yeah, today there's some people saying, oh, AI is not going to replace human beings. It can't fully replace them. Yeah, absolutely, human created work is so important. So I think it's vital that platforms and services that we're using as writers or artists are very transparent, open, and honest about everything, that they're using to sustain something, or to develop it or create it, right? Or anything of that nature um, to help them, ensure that it's Thomas states here, right? It helps him to write code more quickly and securely, right? So, totally, some of the platforms and services I've covered, on this podcast, Sure, maybe there are some tools that, some of the software developers or engineers, are using that we're not aware of because maybe they don't outright state it to us. So it's nice that I think Galley is like upfront about that and says, hey, I am using this, but we will not, we're against AI, and yeah. So yeah, absolutely. A lot of the vibe coded things, right? Quite a few of them have very similar looks to them and feels. So, I can't, assess or verify anything that, whether or not it is vibe coded or not, anything that I maybe covered or touch base on this, right? I'm going off of, sometimes reading what's available and just sharing existent shares, right? Of things in platforms and services and tools, right? Doing trials of them, maybe doing interviews and Q&As, maybe to verify that, or the founders, thoughts on LLMs and things of that nature, right? And, their policies against AI, right? And things like that, totally, you can circle back to the Q&As they did with Subfolio's founder, right? Liam Pierce, and also Dapple CEO and co-founder Osbaldilson. Also, yeah, and one of the questions I asked was, what is there any use of AI? Because it is an important thing to be aware of that, whether or not a submission management platform is doing that at all. And yeah, so I think Dapple was, again, they got rid of their assistant tool, right? Again, they just kept their smart form generator, right, at Dapple. And Submittable, I think, for large organizations or like grant ones, or using it for grants. They have some sort of AI assistant. I've never seen what it looks like, right? Because I back when I was on Submittable, I was on the basic tiered CLMP membership discount plan with Dippity Litmag, right? So I never saw that. But if you go into Submittable's documentation stuff, they have some sort of AI assistant tool there or something. Yeah, so that's basically it, in terms of Galley. I can read off, before I go, right, the letter to the editors and just show you guys again a recap of alternatives, right, to Submittable, right, just to see a side by side on plans and pricing as of update, for March 2026 too, towards the end. So let's take a look at the letter to the editors here. I'm just going to read this off for you guys because I think it is nice to read letters from founders, or even I've shared some bits and pieces of founding editors, right? Lit magazine journals, those episodes, some letters or things that are mentioned by the EICs, right? And even those who develop different services or tools or platforms, right, for others. So this is Thomas's letter to editors, right, who come across it, right? Quoting this off. So when his friends and him started their literary journal off-season mag, right, they searched for a tool to manage submission reviews and were broadly disappointed. As the software engineer of the team, he started building an internal platform for receiving and reviewing submissions. As that project grew, it became more technically complex than the off-season website itself. At the same time, he began to hear about other journals facing the same problem. So he decided to sign off the editorial review backend into its own app, Galley. He believes there is an opportunity to build a fantastic and polished experience for literary journals. Modern tooling and software have made it possible for a project of this magnitude to be built by a single developer. The mission of Galley is simple: be a polished platform for reviewing submissions for literary journals. That's the focus, literary journals. Their needs are specific, their budgets demand fair pricing. They don't have time to waste on finicky systems or gluing together disparate platforms. He's seen and experienced some doozies as the husband of a writer. With Galley, journal editors get a refined inbox modeled after Gmail and Linear. The tooling is elegant and powerful. For a small zine or curious editor, Galley is free. With a single editor plan, you can create a call for submissions, review work by yourself, and have a collected place for all the work you receive. In the standard plan, in Galley's standard paid tier, 3 editors can work together, 5 reviewers. Editors can assign reviewers to give their feedback. Editors have final say on what gets accepted. Reviewers get notified and reminded to respond to the work. This capability expands with the professional tier. Need more? He's working again on a department tier with even more features, non-editor admins, cycling reviewers, and editors as the team cycles out every year, and custom domains for accepting submissions. An editorial review platform is nothing about submissions. Galley makes it easy to get folks submitting to your journal. You can share your call for submissions with high quality social media graphics. The call page offers a drop zone for simple submission uploads. Every call gets a QR code you can put on signs for easy submission. With the professional tier, you get a custom email address where writers can email you submissions with their work attached. They get auto uploaded into your submissions inbox ready for review. Galley is just getting started, and again, Thomas is open to ideas about how it can improve and feedback and all of that. So yeah, again, I'm sure the contact address will be updated. I think it got a delivery failure, but we'll see. Maybe I'll do a Q&A with Thomas in the future. I've tried to do Q&As with as many of the founders of these submission management systems and platforms as possible. So far, I've released one with Subfolio and Dapple. So you can check those out on my Substack again if you're curious. But yeah, anyways, I think it's awesome what Thomas is striving to do here to, again, have another solution for others, right? Submittable is not the only one out there again. So I know some Lit Magazine journals are still, migrating to Submittable, but I think, before doing so, they should look at all the options on the table, right? So that's all I'm trying to do on the series. My preference to date is Subfolio, and for others, that could be, different. It could be Duo Suma, it could be Dapple, it could be Ola, Moksha, or Galley, right? So I'm just doing an existence share episode so you're aware this exists, right? And maybe to check it out and see and dig further into it, maybe test drive it out and see maybe it's something for you one day. So yeah. Oh, and PS, one more thing. There is like a, I think a dark mode, light mode toggle. I like dark mode and light mode toggles. It helps. I think some things can be hard on the eyes. I tend to use dark mode a lot on most systems I use, but not all of them have that. That is a nice thing, I think, that is here. Yeah, so anyways, I'm going to circle back to what I said, right? Sometimes I mention episodes you guys should check out or circle back to. So yeah. So on this podcast series, I've done a couple overview episodes discussing my thoughts on some of these or when they started, right? Now, Subfolio is again another alternative to Submittable. And yeah, so episode 36, 48, and 71. You can look back at those episodes if you're curious and to learn more about it. And then I covered Dapple in episode 52 and 95. Now, some things you may have, from that episode 52 have changed with Dapple, and that includes, right, the pricing and plans. So just keep that in mind a little bit there. I think they did increase, right, their CLMP membership discount from 10% to 20%. And some of the tiers changed. And I'll circle back and show you guys in a little bit here. And I also covered Ola in episode 94. And I also covered Moksha in episode 85. And then what else? Duo Suma. Yeah, so I covered Duo Suma in episode 53, right? So you can look at those overview episodes. That's me just, discussing it, maybe giving my thoughts, covering pricing and plans, which can change over time, some things. But for the most part, submission management systems, stick around for, maybe decades or several years, right? For the most part, features stay in place and they add some features, some new things over time. Typically after beta launches or initial launches, maybe some things change in pricing and discounts, right, at most. So yeah, platforms are continuously always evolving, improving. Even Submittable looks night and day from what it was when it initially started a long time ago, right? So, Submittable, if you're curious, my coverage of it, episode 35, the Submittable overview. And yeah. So, yeah, so I probably have experience again with Submittable and Subfolio. And then I've done brief trials of some of the other ones I've covered on this podcast just to test drive some of the features, right? And I've interacted with some as just a writer or myself, or submitter, you could say, right, from time to time. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. Again, the pricing and plans. So let's do a side by side here. Let's look at it. I'm just curious, right? I can't remember all of the pricing and plans off the top of my head. So this is Galley again, right? So we have the pricing and plan here. Now let's look at Subfolio's pricing here. So yeah, you can see Savolio does have a small plan right now, currently right $10 a month. As of March 2026, this is what it's showing. And Savolio Limited is $29 a month. And again, CLMP members do get discounts for some of the platforms I mentioned, the series, which I mentioned earlier. Yeah, and then let's take a look at Dapple's pricing here, right? So again, Dapple used to have like a free tier here, but I think you could still do like a demo trial of it. I'm sure they let you do that, right? Obviously. So yeah. And yeah, Dapple again changed some things. It looks a little bit different from before. You can see their pricing plan. Now they do have discounts available, right? CLMP members get a 20% discount off and additional submission credits. Then they have some other, things for nonprofits and charities too. So when you apply that, right, then it's going to be 20% off that, right? Just keep that in mind. The pricing here would be 20% off that. And yeah, they have a growth and pro plan. And yeah, their growth and pro plans are on the higher end, but I would say Dapple and some of the other, submission management systems I've covered, their hard plans are packed with a lot of features. So it comes down to, what you're looking for and the size of your lit mag and journal, right? I would say Dapple does have some neat features, right, for lit magazine journals that intake a lot of visual art, right? You can see those cards, but for the most part, a lot of submission management systems, some of them have similar features, some of them, but the look and feel of each one is different, so you have to choose one that really works for you, that you like, right? For me, my lit mag and journal, right, Dibbity, we're currently on Subfolio, and I like it absolutely. A lot of great features. This is the Subfolio Discover page, right? So there we are, Dibbity Lit Mag, right? So again, love that we're able to have as many calls open as we want to, and we're not restricted like we were on Submittables, a CLMP membership discount plan, right? Yeah, and a couple other things I mentioned, my pros cons list and my guidebook, right, and the series elsewhere on my thoughts on each one. So I won't go over every single thing again. But yeah, I'm just showing you the pricing and plans of each one. Dual Suma again has a different, billing, it's per usage based, right? Fees are usage based on Dual Suma, so that's a different, you know, model, right? And that Dual Suma has compared to all the other ones. Ola does have also a one-off plan, it is showing though up to, 500 submissions here, so it is much higher, for, one-time fee. I think that's a nice plan, and then the standard, right, is showing for Ola 19.99 a month, right, and premium plan 34.99. So I would say Ola is fairly cost friendly, and yeah, so there are, again, larger lit magazine journals organizations out there that may need like, a higher enterprise or pro plan, right? Obviously, if you're a small team, then, absolutely, I would say Apple's not too bad, especially if you are on the CLP membership discount. But yeah, totally, this could be outside of others' ballpark, totally, those growth and pro plans, especially even with the discount, maybe. It all depends, so the starter plan is not too bad. You still get quite a bit, on Dapple's plan, and again, that's not the discounted price there, but yeah. Anyways, and yeah, so Moksha is on the higher end. I don't know if Moksha will ever change its plans and pricing, but you can see it's $75 a month, right, for the tier they have for their monthly plan, and then they have other, right, annual plans and biannual here. But yeah, so I just wanted to show you a side by side. So Galley, the pricing honestly isn't too bad with Galley. I think the free tier is kind of limited in terms of 50 submissions a year. I don't know if that's ever going to change. I'm sure some things will change with it. Some of the pricing plans, again, have changed with some of the ones I've covered. So I'm just circling back and sharing with you guys, so you can see, the different ones out there. Yeah, so again, just because I like Subfolio doesn't mean you will. Not everyone's going to like the same thing I like. So, that's why I'm sharing Galley and I've shared the other ones, because I think it's important to be aware of, all the options on the table. Again, there's a lot of different choices nowadays, besides Submittable. And I'm not saying Submittable is bad or anything like that. I'm saying like every platform, out there has room for improvement, right? Totally over time. And there was absolutely some frustrating things like the limitations of Submittable, which is why I left. And I didn't feel it was as friendly for collaboration. And again, you want something that your reading team is comfortable on, easy to use, has good support around it. And I would say, I'm, yeah, definitely happy with Subfolio. So totally check it out. Check out the other ones, and bookmark Galley. That's one to circle back to and see if that's an option for you. If you're not someone who, wants monthly plans, or, pricing, maybe is scaring you for some things I showed you, no one wants to be out of money, monthly, but I think there is absolutely value in having a submission man system as you grow over time. Think about it, right? If you have thousands of submissions, hundreds of submissions, right? Then it's really hard to do all of that just through email, and to collaborate with team members if you want to have a team and everything managed, right? And yeah, again, there are some larger lit magazine journals out there that are just using tally forms and doing tip jars with that. I've shared that in Only Poems episode not too long ago, a while back. You could listen to that. There are two different episodes for that. So I think was it one? It may have been 112. I think that one, right? I think it was. Yeah, I think it was episode 112 where it was doing a recap and showing you that they were probably moving away from submittable, it looks like, and I think they've chosen to do intake forms through Tally, and you can do some payment tip jar integrations through that. A lot of the submission man systems I've shared, not all of them, but they do leverage Stripe, as an integration for facilitating, things like tip jars, payouts to lit magazine journals, or even some of the ones I've covered on the series, not all, but they allow you to, do all of your contributor payouts through, just the submission management system itself. So you don't have to use external, payment apps like PayPal or anything like that. There's no need for that, right? Because you can do that through a Stripe connection. You do have to be approved for it, right? Be careful of your wording. Something I shared on the latest article, and maybe we'll cover this in a future episode, I don't know, but was talking about tips and donations. So if you're not a nonprofit, if you're not registered as a nonprofit, and maybe you're using Stripe, some of the Stripe connections, integrations that some of these submission management systems have, you want to be very careful about your wording, So if you're not a nonprofit, you want to say tips. You want to say nothing but, optional tips, right? Tip jars, right? You don't want to use the word donations. You can use the word support us, you can use tip jars, tip us, but anything on your landing page, or where others are interacting with any of the integrations and stuff, even on your website, you want to specify tips, or buy a coffee, things like that. Even look at Kofi, right? Ko-fi, there's a tip jar there, right, with Ko-fi Kofi, right? So yeah, just wanted to reiterate that because that's something I ran into not too long ago. So you want to stick with saying tips, tip jars, optional, additional tips, and it's okay to have other services others can choose from, like optional editorial feedback and things like that. And yeah, I'm not sure if Galley will have other things like that, in terms of features, but I'm sure more will be added to it over time. Just wanted to share it with you guys today because I thought it was pretty neat that another editorial review platform, or submission manager, intake system to, manage your, review workflow and the review submissions was coming out. So yeah, so now there's a fourth new one, guys. So yeah, a lot of options to choose from. It's very tough. So just want to reiterate again. Yeah, I've been on Subfolio, for since summer of 2025. My reading team, we're happy with it, but I know absolutely some have chosen other submission systems, and it's all up to you what you like. You certainly may like Galley, you certainly may like Dapple or Ola or Moksha or even Submittable. Some are happy on Submittable. Some founding editors I know, they're like, I'm not leaving Submittable. We have our whole archive in it. I'm just not going to move. Some are like that, right? Some founding editors, or some are like open to new platforms that take away some of the frustrations or limitations they have with Submittable. And absolutely, there are some things that with Submittable are very hard to do. And one of those being, absolutely, I think, I hope more submission man systems do this, is to allow founding editors, that pay writers for work or contest awards, to facilitate payouts within the system itself. And I think that's what, absolutely, there are some out there to do that. Submittable, a lot of people can't. And yeah, so I've updated my pro cons list, my guidebook. I mentioned, released an article a little bit on tip jars and things of that nature, other features, with submission management platforms. And you can check out my Substack and some other places I plugged in the review series. I also updated my guidebook to mention Galley, but I'm working on, just a PS note, I'm hopefully working on an updated 6 by 9 version of the guidebook. The font got really small when I converted the file, from the Word doc to PDF and then into, the formatting of it. Doing that, for some reason, it created hundreds of text boxes and wasn't fixed in there, all of my, sentences. So the font, originally in the document file itself, the Word file is like 11, right? And then it shrunk that down, almost cut it in half. Typically don't use smaller font sizes, but it's the guidebook is still readable in print. It's available in a few bookstores in Europe right now. The print version of it, paperback, but I'm hoping to do, if I have time, a 6 by 9 version for you guys with a much larger font size, or just increase the font on it so others can pick it up if they want. But for right now, you can get it as an ebook if you don't mind a slightly smaller font, if you don't mind a small font, it's still readable, right? It's just not the easiest on the eyes, the print version I did do a revised edition, tucked out some more typos the other day again, not too long ago. So yeah. So, if you're looking to start your own lit mag or journal, check out my guidebook. It has all my notes on it from the past few years. It's a diary and guidebook. And it lists everything I've covered on the series, pairs with the whole podcast series and episodes too. And yeah, so that's pretty much it, guys. Signing off. So don't forget to circle back and check out Galley. Again, Instagram was showing early access of April 1st, 2026, and launch date of June 2026. So we'll see. I'll circle back to it and maybe do a little bit more digging into it. Right now I haven't, so can't give a rating, can't give any, insight on whether, I like it or not. But from what I can see, I really like the focus that Galley has and what it's striving to do. Again, I'm all for any platform or tool that strives to make founding editors' lives easier and also writers, right, and artists who are submitting, right? You want a very easy process and you want it to be smooth sailing, right? So it's important that, if you're going to choose a submission management system, that you, again, do research, and really choose one that fits what your goal is and your average submission volume each year or even month, right? And yeah, so absolutely, check out Galley, and it's this year a bit further. It sounds like it's gonna launch and kickstart. So just wanted to share it with you guys. I think it's awesome what Thomas is doing here with Galley. I just don't know, I can't really give you insight onto it. I haven't done a trial of it or anything like that further yet or anything. So yeah, I'll circle back to it and maybe update my list and things like that with some more of the pros and cons and stuff. So yeah, for right now, I just added it as a possible option for others to check out and just wanted to cover it on the series and share it with you. Whether it be a founding editor or writer, submission man systems, again, with, you can find a lot of, sometimes with the discover pages, and through them you can find more submission calls and opportunities. So it is, one to maybe bookmark and circle back to. Ola also has, a discover page and Subfolio and Duo Sumo, right? So yeah. And don't forget to check out Off Season Mag too. I don't know if they're open right now. I haven't looked. But anyways, I don't know if I'll do an episode on them. We'll see. So yeah, and yeah, don't forget to check out Off Season Mag too, which, Thomas Eckert is part of, on the masthead, right? I don't know if they're open right now. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't think so. I could be wrong. But yeah, circle back and check them out as well. I think they started in 2025 and again, based out of Canada. So yeah. So that's pretty much it. That's Galley. Again, take care, guys, and see you in the next episode. Yeah. And one more thing. I know I said take care and bye, but I tend to tack on sometimes a double PS note. So don't forget, again, Galley is on social media. I just saw quite recently, in the story on Instagram of Galley, right, that looks like Thomas is working on some cool features and sharing some sneak peeks in the stories. So do follow and check it out at galley.pub there. I last saw like a possible review history timeline and, being worked on. And yeah, the other submission management systems I've covered on this series, right? They do have social media accounts, but I think what is most beneficial, absolutely, is the YouTube channels of some of the ones I've covered, like Subfolio, Dapple. Obviously, Submittable has a YouTube channel. However, till today, I think a lot of founding editors struggle with Submittable, like grasping it, because there are a lot of features right within it, but they don't have access to all of it. And there's not like, I think they should do maybe, I haven't found one to my knowledge, like maybe a revised video solely for those on the CLMP membership plan, or tips for them, specifically. I was gonna put together maybe something on that, like just general tips on for any submission management platform you're interacting with, because some of them have similar features, but of course they're not completely identical. But just things to keep in mind whenever you're leveraging maybe an editorial platform or things of that nature, right? So I will try to do that soon. I know that was asked, and I gave someone a couple tips in our, LitMag Lab chat. So I will try to make an article around that maybe one day. But anyways, yeah, Moksha has technically a YouTube video. Dual Suma has a very detailed documentation, and I'm sure, Ola will have more resources and documentation around it too soon. So I just prefer both text-based documentation and video-based, and learning how to do specific things within the submission management system, right? Things you're going to do on a day-to-day basis, with it. And yeah, so that's all. I just wanted to remind you, again, some of these platforms do have social media channels, and yeah, so not everyone's using the same social media platform either, to concentrate on or to post updates. It's hard to maintain that across the board, but I think, if you find one, that's being updated or regularly used, give it a follow, or just, yeah, and yeah, so that's pretty much it. I just want to add that. And yeah, don't forget, also, there are, various tips episodes, for the series as well, where I share my experience running a lit manga journal, and also just some writer based questions, for the Q&A portion of the series. So there is a playlist on that, aside from the lit magazine journals I've covered, and also the submission management system, and yeah, the various, tools and services, etc., right? So yeah, that's all. Signing off now. So take care. Yeah, officially now. Yeah.